Hi students and parents at STEM. My name is Glenn Arnold and I am one of the main chemistry teachers at STEM, and so wanted to go over a few things about how class will work this year and what you can expect of me and how you can contact me when you need to get in touch. First off, as I said, I'm one of the main chemistry teachers, and so one of the things I teach is Honors Chemistry 1. We've got about 4 sections of this year, so that's going to be around 125, 130 students. So for those of you all with freshmen and sophomores, there's a pretty good chance that your students might be in my class. I also teach Intro to Organic and Biochemistry. I'm super excited about this class this year. This is a brand new thing in the state, and this is something that's going to be a college preparatory class, but not at an AP level, something that's going to help students that are going into sciences and engineering and medicine and those sorts of things, so that they're not one of those kids that get weeded out. I don't want that to happen to any of my kids at STEM. And then I'm teaching AP Chemistry and Honors Chemistry 2. And of course, that's a class for college credit. So we're talking about the very upper level chemistry students in high school. And if they do well in the AP test at the end of the year, of course, they'll get college credit for that class as well. One of the things that I do, I think, very uniquely, as opposed to a lot of typical science teachers, is that I do something called a flipped classroom. What that means is that typically when a student would have homework at home, instead of them actually working on a worksheet or something like that, what they'll typically have is they'll have a video from me, and usually these are called vodcasts. And so these get assigned a couple of times a week, and the students will go home, watch those, take notes. That's essentially the homework, and then what they'll do is what would typically be homework is they come into class, and then we'll work through problems, and we'll have hopefully some meaningful discussions. We'll work on labs and do all those sorts of activities to further their understanding of chemistry. The point behind that for me is that I want more time with students so that we can do things like whiteboarding and to really dive in and analyze what different kinds of particles are and how those relate to compounds and stuff like that, and really just to get outside of the classroom sometimes and to learn things about chemistry in new and unique ways that maybe aren't just relegated to students sitting in a classroom and listening to a lecture. So what does that mean for your student? That means that for the most part they won't have a whole lot of chemistry. They won't have a whole lot of homework outside of probably the AP classes, and just the rigor involved in the AP classes means that there probably will be some homework, but it'll be a little bit less in a flipped classroom, and the bulk of what they'll be doing at home for my classes will be watching those videos, and then occasionally some long-term projects as well. Another question that parents always have is what's the grading scheme? So I use two things that I think are a little bit different in many cases. One thing is standards-based grading, and so that means that typically what I do is I grade for proficiency on a standard. So every class has standards. These are some of the standards from Chemistry 1 Honors. And so what I try to do is that instead of I just give a unit test, although we do have some of those, but I give specific short assessments, usually 8 to 10 questions that are on a single standard. So you see a standard here that says apply kinetic molecular theory to the phases of matter. So the student, once we go over that and we do some activities on it, we work through that stuff in class and have our discussions, what we'll do then is that we'll take an assessment over that one specific standard. And so that gives me a way to assess their proficiency of that standard at that time. And then as we take unit tests as well, that will give me some additional understanding of their proficiency. And the reason that I do use this system, as opposed to sort of the sort of standard, hey, you turn in homework, you do quizzes are 20%, and tests are 40%, and labs are such and such percent, is that what I'm really interested in is, did the students learn the material? Not just did they do the work, although that's important also, but did they actually learn the material that they're being required to learn, that they're supposed to be proficient in? And to go along with that, I use what is called a mastery system as well. I want the students to learn the material, not just to get the grade. And I'm not implying that grades aren't important. I know that particularly they are important for high school students as we're looking at getting into colleges and getting scholarships and things like that. But I feel like if the students know the material, the grades are going to come. And so what mastery means in my classroom is that you don't move on until you've mastered the content in that one area. So if a student gets through, if we get to where the sort of the normal stopping point would be for Unit 1, and we take that Unit 1 test, and then I look back for that individual student, for your child, and their Unit 1 test maybe wasn't as good as it should be, and then I look back at those individual standards and those weren't proficient, then what that student will do is I'll assign some additional activities. They'll go back and work through that Unit 1 stuff with the opportunities to do some retakes, which does a couple of things. First off, it's going to help the student's grade, and I know that that obviously is important. But more importantly to me, it's going to make sure that the student knows that material. And chemistry, much like a math class, sort of builds sequentially. And so it's really vital that they get the stuff in Unit 1 and in Unit 3 so that when they get to Unit 9, they've got all of that base to stand on. And so that's why I think mastery learning is so important. And there'll be some more materials coming home to explain a little bit more about that as well. Of course, we're at the STEM Academy, and so that means for us that our STEM habits are really important for us. And so of those 6 STEM habits, 2 of those are inquiry and critical thinking. And what that means in my class is that I'm not looking for cookbook answers. I don't want to do a whole lot of cookbook labs where they just follow a procedure and then they spit out the answer that I want. I want them to investigate and figure out, how do I construct a lab? How do I figure out what this is? Maybe not with a step-by-step thing from my teacher. Or how do I solve this problem? Or what does this mean in this particular scenario? That's where the inquiry and critical thinking really come into play for me. For collaboration and professionalism, almost everything in my class is done as a team and in a group, and we'll have some guidelines on how to do this that we'll cover here at the beginning of the year. But most importantly, I want to just assure parents and students of one thing, is that I know what it's like to be that student that feels like you're the one student in the group doing the work and that the rest of the students aren't doing that, and that just won't be allowed in my class. I will take a lot of student input to that, and I will speak with those group members individually, and we'll make sure that if there are students that aren't participating in the group, that's not going to count against an individual student, while at the same time we want to work together as professionally as possible and collaborate to be able to understand and do that inquiry and critical thinking that's so important here at STEM. And lastly, we have design and innovation. And as I mentioned with the inquiry and critical thinking part, a lot of what we're going to do, a lot of the labs, a lot of the projects are going to be things that your students develop on their own. They're not going to be things that I hand to them and say, hey, I want you to do a report on this. It's going to be something where I say, what are you interested in, or how can we solve this scenario, and what sort of thing can you design and figure out to be able to do that. And so I think that will help a lot of students to be able to bring all of those STEM habits into a core class like chemistry is. So finally, to wrap up, how are you going to get in touch with me when you've got questions, or maybe just when you want some further clarification? Of course, parent nights are kind of a rough time to do that because there's tons of parents in the building. It's really tough to get a one-on-one conversation with me. So really the best answer there is to email me. This is my email address, of course. It's pretty simple, just glenn.arnold@knoxschools.org. We'll have the Canvas system pretty much fully implemented by the end of the next week or two. And Canvas is essentially going to replace Fusion and Edmodo for us here at STEM, and so that's going to be the primary method that your students will interact with their assignments. The parents can keep track of that the students are going to have a calendar, and that teachers are going to converse with the students about what's going on a day-to-day basis. And then I'd also just throw out there that all of my videos, as I said, since I do the flipped classroom, there's a lot of video content out there. If you go to YouTube and look for the channel name Arnold Science, there's probably 120 or so videos there right now. They're arranged into playlists, so if you've got a student that's in organic biochemistry, their first playlist for the year is already up with 4 or 5 videos in it. All of the Chemistry 1 videos for the whole year are actually already up and arranged into unit playlists. And so you can always sort of check there and see what your students are doing there as well. And of course, always feel free to email me or to call the school, and they can give me a message so that I can get back in touch with you. It's going to be a great year, and I'm really looking forward to teaching all of your students in chemistry this year. And I really hope that they learn a lot and hopefully don't have that dread of chemistry that a lot of students have, and maybe that we had in high school. I know I did too. And so that chemistry can be something that is a part of what they're going to base their lifelong learning on. Thanks so much.